Hello again, and welcome to another episode of the PHA Podcast. My name is Stefan Gillum. I am your host, and I am so delighted today to have joining with us Mr. Marc Morial, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Urban League. So good to have you
Hey,
today,
great
Marc.
to be with you. Thanks.
I appreciate you, man. So tell us a little bit. We want to get everybody's kind of start out story. Tell us a little bit how you got from where you were, wherever that starting point is for you, over to being the president and CEO.
Well, I'm a native of New Orleans.
Yes.
And I'm a recovering lawyer and a recovering politician.
I like it.
So I started my career here as a lawyer, a trial lawyer, did a number of very interesting things. And then I got involved in politics. I ran for the Louisiana State Senate,
Right.
served there for 2 years. And then in 1994, ran and got elected mayor of New Orleans in 94 and 2 terms there to 2002. Went back to practicing law for a year and was recruited to become the new president of the National Urban League in 2003 and 2004. So being at the National Urban League was an opportunity to continue the work I loved. Working on behalf of people, working on behalf of cities, working on behalf of those who've been locked out and left out, building coalitions, bringing people together, public-private partnerships, public policy, activism, and the like. And that's what energizes me and animates me. And so today, the National Urban League is the largest historic civil rights and urban advocacy organization in the nation.
Love it.
With 92 affiliates in 36 states, serving 300 communities, with 2,500 plus paid professional employees, along with literally millions of people served and millions of people who are either members in the traditional sense or part of our online sustaining membership program. So we are in the kitchen, as I like to say, where it is
cooking
hot,
up something good.
Where it is hot and challenging and difficult, but we do this work on both a national level and in the 92 affiliate communities where we are.
Okay. So I know what the Urban League is, what the National Urban League is, but I know there's a lot of people who've heard the name. They know, oh yeah, the Urban League, but they have no clue what the Urban League
Think of
does.
it this way. We do 2 very important things.
Okay.
One, we are one of the largest providers of direct services to Black people and other disadvantaged people in the country. What do I mean by services? After-school programs.
Okay.
Home buyer education and housing counseling programs, workforce development, job training, job placement services, entrepreneurship services,
Lots.
health equity through community health workers, and other types of justice and restorative justice programs like expungement and reentry and the like. So we do all of that, but then we are a premier civil rights advocate. In 1963, we were one of what was known as the Big Six civil rights organizations, along with Dr. King and others, who led this nation and brought the heat and the pressure and the advocacy, which passed the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act of 65, the Fair Housing Act of 1968, and in the 1970s, push for the Community Reinvestment Act and the anti-redlining laws. And I could continue to go on. Today, we are active on multiple fronts. We're working on voting rights, justice system reform. We are working on housing issues, protecting the Consumer Protection Finance Bureau, for example. Working on a rewriting a new rule for the Community Reinvestment Act. So we're intimately involved in on the public policy front, but we provide direct services. Most nonprofits, most civil rights organizations, they do one
or the other.
Yep. And we combine the two because I like to say we want to be a vehicle of change and a voice of change.
I love it. I love it. Now, you spoke a little bit earlier how you're a recovering trial attorney and you're a recovering politician. And so, I did a little research because you got to do a little research for your interviews. What made you decide to follow in your father's footsteps here in the city of New Orleans?
I grew up in a family, my father and my mother, who were involved in civil rights, civic affairs, and politics. And I think it just was contagious.
Right.
It caught on from the time I was, a little boy. I would go to civil rights rallies and civil rights meetings and political activities. And my father was part of the generation, along with my mother, who were civil rights activists. My father was a civil rights lawyer. He was the NAACP president here in New Orleans. My mother was a teacher and a teachers union activist and a civic leader.
So it's just
and
in the blood.
It was sort of in the blood and in the DNA. So I thought, that it was never even a thought or question, and I was never really pushed by my parents. It was contagious, and it energized me and compelled me. I became a lawyer, and being a lawyer was interesting, but to use my law degree as an instrument of change is what fired my passion.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about, we talked about how the National Urban League works in a housing capacity, right? And so you're educating people on home ownership. What else are you all doing in
So
housing?
let me maybe paint the picture.
Yeah,
so
that's what I was going to ask.
What we're dominant in is as a housing counseling agency.
Okay.
And housing counseling, of course, really means home buyer education and home buyer financial literacy. We are one of the largest providers of those services in the country. We are the largest provider of those services to African Americans in the country. We have over 120 housing counselors who work for us in some 40 to 50 locations around the country. So we're dominant in that area, and we're very active in that area. In 8 to 10 affiliates, we are a low-income, affordable housing developer, building both rental and home ownership. And the National Urban League now is the owner and co-developer of a major project in Harlem. It will be a 17-story building. The exterior of the building is already complete. It will be our headquarters. It will be the first ever urban civil rights museum in New York City.
Wow.
We will have 3 floors of high-quality retail and 177 units of housing, all affordable units.
I love it.
So what we're doing is, with this project, which is a signature project, one of the largest projects in Harlem in 50 plus years, we are practicing what we preach. We're demonstrating you can do mixed use. You can do it with black developers, with black architects, with African American contractors. You can do it in partnership with other developers. You can bring first-class retail. You can do affordable housing. You can have a cultural and a community component. And you can bring a historic civil rights organization which says, my new headquarters is going to be in Harlem, Harlem, USA. So we do housing development work, and many of our affiliates do that work, and we do it in partnership with sometimes public housing authorities, cities, redevelopment agencies, and the like. And that is what is exciting to me. It's a continuation of what I did in this city. In this city, we had, I think, one of the most innovative housing initiatives in urban America in the 1990s. We brought together banks, community-based groups, the Fannie Mae's and the Freddie Macs of the world, to really launch an effort to build and house and improve and increase the home ownership rate in the city. And it really worked. I think we moved the home ownership rate in those days from maybe 40% up to about 50% on an overall basis. And we were helped by a partnership with the Clinton administration, 2 secretaries of HUD, Henry Cisneros and Andrew Cuomo, who really believed in the power of city governments to be transformative. We worked with a number of progressive bankers at the time, both local and national banks, who were very interested in working closely with us. We aligned all of the community-based groups around the table. We asked people to focus on specific neighborhoods, so we weren't walking, stepping, running all over each other, and we had tremendous success. What happened is 9/11. And 9/11 is seminal in that it really, really put a dent in housing in this country that we haven't recovered from.
Exactly. We're still recovering from it. So when you talked about how the National Urban League not only does housing programs and development, but also advocacy and helps in policy development. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing now in terms of where the writing on the wall is for affordable housing in this
Well,
nation.
I do think we just had a situation in the early days of the Biden administration where we had a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
A huge missed opportunity. President Biden heard us.
Mm-hmm.
And in his original, if you will, recovery plan called Build Back Better, he included significant dollars and a commitment to housing.
Right.
Joe Manchin came along and was not comfortable with and opposed significant components of that program. That program was skinnied up.
Right.
It was shrunk. It got rebranded and named as the Inflation Reduction Act, and it passed. But materially, we didn't address the needs to build a greater supply of housing and affordable housing. It was a missed opportunity. And now we have the housing issue driving homelessness in communities. We have this lack of investment in housing putting upward pressure on both mortgage rates and rents. And it is hitting Americans.
It's hitting everybody.
Poor,
Yep.
working class, middle income Americans right square in their pocket. And I'll talk about this in the morning. And it is a ticking time bomb.
Right.
It's a failure to invest. The private sector has a role to play.
Yes.
They can't do it alone.
Not
the
at
public sector has a role to play. They cannot do it alone.
And I'm so glad you say
Community-based
that.
groups have a role to play. They can't fix it by themselves. Redevelopers and planners can come up with all of the best laid plans. It takes fuel, it takes investment, it takes money, it takes coordination. So we're facing that now.
Right.
And all of us are trying to do the best we can do with what we have, you know, with the tools we have. But this problem is of a huge magnitude.
Right.
If you just look at the trend line of what we have not done. So we used to add probably 1 million units a year.
Right.
I don't know if we're building 500 to 600.
I was going to say, I think we're only doing like 300, 400 now.
It is a tragedy that, and so you go to the streets of Los Angeles, New Orleans, Chicago, Washington, you see people without a roof over their head. And they are a combination of folks, including many who are economically, because they can't make this notion that people are living in their cars.
Right.
This idea that people are living for a nation with a $25 trillion economy, for a nation that is a citadel of American democracy, for a nation, we should be indignant. We should be fired up. We should say we want something to be done.
Right.
If you can cut taxes for the wealthiest Americans, if you can send billions to Ukraine, if you can have every type of priority, but housing the American people.
Right.
And I really believe that it is one of those issues. So we work across on issues of poverty and economic self-sufficiency. This is driving housing costs, and affordability is driving a new type of poverty in America.
Yeah. So you talked about the work that you've done to kind of bring those together, and you're saying how you know everybody's trying to do it individually right now, and it takes a lot of coming together. And I know with the National Urban League, a lot of what you've done is, like you said, private-public partnerships. How do you go about bringing that coalition together? How do you go about getting people to see the larger vision, seeing the writing on the wall, and getting a true, not only understanding, but investment in the solution?
So there are two.
'Cause there's a lot of people that understand the
Yeah,
solution.
and there's two ways.
Get the investment
it's an excellent question. So two ways to do it. I mean, one way is a national urban league, an urban league affiliate, or a community-based group that has standing and credibility can probably stand up some projects.
Right.
But I think mayors, large county executives, sometimes governors are uniquely suited. When I was mayor of this city, if I picked up the phone and said to the top 5 bankers, I need you at lunch on Friday, they were going to be there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? If I said, I have a plan I want you to consider, they were not going to dismiss it out of hand.
Right.
Because they knew I was going to bring city resources. If we do this, I'll bring that. And so who is uniquely suited on a local level to bring the financial community, banks, philanthropy, housing activists together to find the right type of approaches? You've got to build, but you have to make sure you build affordable, right? If you just have a gentrification strategy,
that's not
all you're doing is playing checkers with poverty.
That's right.
You're going to move it someplace else, and you're just reshuffling the chairs on the deck, and it is a dumb approach.
Yeah, because you're moving it. First, you moved it out of the inner city. Then you're moving it back into the inner city.
Yes.
Then you're moving it back out of the inner city, and you're just doing this
and it
round
makes
robin with
no sense at all. And anyone who's studied the long arc of history, I mean, the 30s and the New Deal and the movements we made to try to provide more housing.
GI bills and all of that.
All of this stuff will clearly understand that we need to learn from yesterday and understand that there's a part of yesterday which was very powerful, but they also let people out.
Yeah.
They allowed redlining, banking discrimination, segregated housing.
Right.
We got to build it differently in the 21st century. But build it, we must.
What is the role that you see that the PHA plays in this entire space? Where can the local public housing agency really focus in order to support this vision and support this way forward?
So the PHAs have this responsibility to sort of administer a portfolio of real estate and execute on a set of federal laws.
Right.
I think the PHAs have to become more dynamic. I think that its leaders have to become advocates.
Right.
I think they have to educate people on what does it take to build affordable housing. What is required? You know, in this city, just doing Section 8 certificates, for example.
Right, yeah.
That's not enough, but it's part of the formula.
Right.
Like, I am one who believes that we should move that program in the direction to where every eligible person should be able to get a Section 8 voucher.
Right.
That's how the SNAP program works.
Yep.
That's how a lot of us, we got to come up, we can't continue to have a 1950s, 60s, and 70s mindset about today's
That's what I was going to say.
problems.
We've got to give the housing industry the same avenue and opportunity that we've given to all of these other programs, all of these other outlets, all of these other avenues of upraising capital in America. We've got to give those same avenues and opportunities
Think
to
of what we've done in the last 20 plus years.
Right.
During 9/11, airlines were in trouble, hotels were in trouble. We provided bailouts.
Yeah.
In the Great Recession, the banks were in trouble. We provided significant bailouts.
Yep.
After the COVID recession, we provided checks for people, provided PPP loans that were forgivable. And on top of that, massive subsidies for all types of industries. But where was the support to truly respond to the housing crisis that we have? And so, you know, we can't get caught in this, you know, I get what people say, oh, you know, we can't afford it. I want to find a guy who afforded that big tax cut in 2017 and 18.
There's not been anything that we actually wanted that we couldn't afford.
Right.
Yeah.
If it is a priority. And I think we're at a stage in and a crossroads in American life. So I think the PHAs, can play a role in being a dynamic voice and in offering innovative approaches.
Yeah.
And it depends on the standing of a PHA in a local community.
Right, absolutely.
How far they can go and whether they have elected officials who appoint them who are open-minded enough to think differently, to try some different things. You can't do it in a conventional way, or you will just continue to exacerbate the problems.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a magical megaphone, right? Question I ask everybody. So we're stepping into the land of magic. I got this megaphone. It's got sparkles all over it. It's rainbow colored. It's got a unicorn on the top of it. It's magical. The thing that's magical about it is the moment you pull that trigger in order to speak into it, everybody on the world stops what they're doing and listens to you. And then they do and implement and receive whatever it is that you have to say. What are you telling the people once I put that megaphone in your hand?
The rent's too damn high.
I love it. I love it.
I mean, I'm going to say something that gets people's attention.
Yeah.
And when I get their attention, then we can say, now let's see how we address it.
Right, yeah.
I mean,
you're right. The rent is way too damn high.
I mean, and it's just, rents, mortgages, and it's exacerbated by a supply problem.
Right.
And a series of policy missteps and opportunity missteps.
Right. That didn't inject
And it
into
should
that
never
supply
take
problem.
away from the fact that in every city in America, there are people on the ground doing powerful things.
Right.
But the scale that we need, the numbers of units that we need, the redevelopment that we need. I tried hard when I led this city that if we were going to work on the neighborhood transformation, I was going to bring street paving to that community. I was going to try to invest in the playgrounds in that community.
Right.
We were going to look at this not just as a housing, if you will, initiative, but as a neighborhood redevelopment initiative.
Right,
We were going to organize the community so that they would take ownership, stakeholderism, and pride into the community. We were going to look at the small businesses in the community and see if there were interventions from technical assistance to loan or grant opportunities that we could bring. In other words, it was a neighborhood transformation. We have to think in terms of neighborhoods.
Right.
We have to think in terms of communities. Housing is pivotal to, key to, central to it.
But it's not all of it.
It's not all.
Yeah, absolutely. Marc Morial,
Thank
President
you.
and CEO of
Thank
the
you.
National
My
Urban
pleasure.
League.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for joining us.
Appreciate you.
And as always, you're watching the PHA Podcast. My name is Stefan Gillum. PHA Podcast is brought to you by AMA Consulting Group, LLC, and I'll see you on the next episode.